very, very happy to be in Ireland today. It's fantastic to be with you, and I thank Board Bia for inviting me here. I'm going to talk about redefining marketing in the digital age, and I call it from bite to bite because we live in a very analog business, but we're living in an increasingly digital world, and the two come together. Regardless of the industry that you work in, the two come together. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we think about navigating through that. I'll show you some examples, primarily from Yildiz Holding. And let me just describe Yildiz Holding. So after I worked at PepsiCo in different markets around the world, I joined Yildiz Holding, which is based in Istanbul. And how many of you have been to Turkey? Istanbul, it's good, it's good. We should try and maybe we can have a Board Bia event in Turkey, and especially in May or June when the weather is nice, that would be great. So there's a family business called Ulker. Ulker is primarily in confectionery, but is also in a lot of different categories: dairy, beverages, culinary. So these are some of the brands, and I'm just giving you this for context to understand a bit of the company. So in the middle are primarily confectionery brands. On the right are non-confectionery brands. There's a retail chain called Shock. There's a frozen business, there's a bread business, there's a meat business, there's a personal care business. There used to be a dairy business, but it was sold last year. There used to be a beverage business that was sold last year. So a lot of CPG and FMCG brands in that umbrella. About 3 years ago, the company acquired, 10 years ago, the company acquired Godiva, which is based out of the US. It's not as strong in Europe, but it's very strong in the US. It's very strong in Japan, growing in China, and a little bit of presence in London, hopefully more soon. So Godiva, premium chocolatier, is part of that. 3 years ago, the company acquired United Biscuits from the UK and wholly owns United Biscuits. So the brands that you probably know and love, like McVities and Jacobs and Cars and Go Ahead, and those brands are now part of our company. And with that acquisition, we created a new business unit within Yildiz Holding called Pladis. And are there any Pladis people here today? Welcome. So Pladis is the confectionery group inside Yildiz Holding. And Pladis is headquartered in London and is part of the overall holding company. And the key brands are the brands that you would know from United Biscuits. They are the Ulker brands, primarily in the Middle East region. And Godiva, which comes in new formats like tablets and things you can buy, not in a fancy Godiva boutique, but that you could buy anywhere else. So those are the brands that are part of Pladis. It's a new company. In a way, it's a startup company, but it's rare to have a startup company with 100-year-old brands. But that's essentially what Pladis is. So I'm going to be referring to these businesses as examples of some of the things that were done today. So that's why I wanted to make sure you had a feel for what they're about. And what I'll cover is the key things, which is consumer centricity and brand relevance. But in order to really do that, we have to think about the digital perspective in the digital world. And when you do that, you have to think about looking at marketing in a new way, which I call redefining marketing, because we're in a transformative period now where everyone needs to relook at their ways of working. So we are in a world where we have two types of bites. We have a digital bite and we have an analog bite, and they coexist. And our job as food marketeers, as beverage marketeers, is to master the analog delivery of what we're doing. Products that taste great, consumer experiences, brands that are relevant, delivering excellent customer experience, consumer experience. We have to do that, but we have to be able to play in this world to enable us to do that. They go together. And it's clear that technology is changing the way we live and that we need to be addressing this. If you think about the rate of change, today is actually the slowest change day. The slowest amount of change happens today than will happen in any other day for the rest of our life. In other words, change is happening faster and faster every single day. So if you think it's fast now, come back for a speech next week, it's even faster then. It's really moving fast. There was more data generated in the last 3 years than in all of human history. Can you believe that? That's not like versus the last 20 years or 100 years. That's versus all of history. So more data in 3 years than all of history. Each day, each one of us receives 74 gigabytes of information or 5,000 stimulating, let's say, stimuli that hits you about brands, about what to do, about choices that need to be made. Versus 20 years ago, this is 4 times more than what it used to be. So think about what that means to consumers and how the brain works and how the brain is wired when you get all these messages coming in and you need to navigate for what's truly relevant for you. This is truly changing the business world, and you would see this a lot starting in your categories, but also in other categories where the whole brand-consumer relationship has changed. It used to be that we could create a brand-driven campaign, run it once or twice a year, and that would be the primary source of developing a brand image, but it's not that way anymore. Now consumers have much more power, they have much more control, they co-create. It's actually what they say to others that is even more important than what we say about our brands. So we need to let go of our brands and recognize that's how it interacts and is built via consumers. Shopping has totally changed. I don't need to talk about that, but there are many categories that you probably shop. You get things via e-commerce, you find more convenient ways to buy. And this is leading to new business models. There is disruption in many, many categories where they're reinventing the way of doing business. We're going through a transformative period across the board. And this applies to food also, food and beverage. The final delivery is analog, but everything up to that is going to be digital enabled. And in my observations, it used to be that FMCG marketers were the classic trained marketers who were ahead of all the other industries. And when bankers or insurance companies wanted to get a good marketeer, they would go to an FMCG company and get that classically trained marketer because we were setting the ways of working and practicing in terms of how to understand consumers, how to build brands, how to engage. That's changed. The other industries are actually farther ahead than FMCG now in understanding things like the customer journey, in understanding things about how to build brands through digital and social media. They're ahead. So the food industry needs to play the game, needs to catch up. And while we may have assets like we have factories, we have tangible products, we sell usually through a grocery store, we have to reinvent the way we operate. So one message I'm giving you is, even if you're in the food business or beverage business, digital totally applies to you and to us. So what is the big picture? What's the big picture in this message? Well, this is a comic of a dinosaur convention, and there's someone standing in front, kind of like me, talking to a bunch of other dinosaurs, and he says, "Gentlemen, the outlook is bleak. The climate's changing, the mammals are taking over, and we have brains the size of a walnut." Now, I'm not suggesting we have brains the size of a walnut. We're in better shape than this. But this is one view of the world, which is there is so much changing. What does this mean for our business? And my view is this is all opportunity. It's all upside if you play it right. There's so much opportunity out there, and we need to take the challenge and be able to step into it. So, what does this mean? We've done a lot of work about how. I've talked about the need to embrace digital, the need to go in digital. The question is how to do it, and where does it stand? And I'll admit, it's very easy to get lost. There are a lot of shiny toys out there, and you can see them in sort of fragmented ways. It's hard to put it together. But the best way I would describe, the best advice I would give you is look at digital and data and technology not as an endpoint, but as an enabler to do the things that you need to do in your business. In other words, the what remains the same, what you need to deliver, which is understanding about consumers, brand purpose, delivering great products, creating great experiences, tapping into emotions. This is all the same. Digital doesn't change that. What it changes is the how. It provides greater efficiency. It can help you give stronger impact, more effectiveness. There are a lot of things on the how. So digital is about, my number one tip is use digital as an enabler and not an end. The second is do it today. Embrace technology today. You don't want to miss the boat on this. And the longer you wait, the harder it is to catch up. The good news is that there's no one who's an expert in this yet. None of the companies are experts. They're all moving towards progress, but no one has the holy grail yet on how to really leverage digital and apply it to the business. So you're not too late, but start today. The second is you need to have clear objectives about what you want to use digital for. And that's really about, it's really about the what do you want it for, why do you want it, how do you use it? And have a clear game plan on going after that. And there's a really nice quote about this, which is, if you have clear objectives, it's a journey. It's like using GPS. If you don't have clear objectives, it's an odyssey, and you're going to be dealing with, cyclops and sirens and all of that stuff from the classic book, The Odyssey. So you need to have clear objectives so you can navigate directly into this. The next one is create a roadmap. And I'm giving you a sample roadmap here on being really clear, again, about the why, the how, and the what. And if you look at digital and data and technology and what could it be used for, there are many different things. But I simplify it into 3 buckets. One is using it for better, deeper, action-oriented insights. The second is about using it to improve customer experience. And the third is about getting better efficiency at doing that. And that's really what you can best use digital for. And this applies directly to our businesses. So if you say this is the kind of the what, how do you do it? Well, you look at a couple phases of what you do because you can't do everything in one go. And these are some samples of the way that some companies that I've been working with are looking at those opportunities. So around insight, creating a data ecosystem, so you make the best use of the data that you have and you build upon it. Getting next generation insights tools. Around experience, getting, let's say, DMP-enabled programmatic media, so you're delivering the right message to the right person at the right time, and putting those things together to increase relevance. And on the efficiency side, focusing more on ROI and getting bang for the buck, right? So these are really immediate areas that you can get benefit. And then there's so much more that you can do with digital. And this is a list of all, a lot of other things, again, within each of these 3 strategic enabler areas where you can use digital. But again, it's a journey on getting there. The other tip on this is data is a very, very powerful thing if used properly, and you should use it. And the first point in using it is using the data you already have. Try and create your own data ecosystem of the things you already have and repurpose it. If you do one test, see how that learning can apply to something else that you're doing. Really, really important to build the foundation to enable the use of data. And it's really a simple starting point. It doesn't have to be complex. So the second point, so that's my kind of prelude on the importance of digital, on really act today, start today, look at it as an enabler, not an end. I now want to talk a little bit about redefining marketing and what that means. And I'll start with a quiz for you. What is the CMO unapproval rate? There was a research study done with Harvard Business Review recently, and they asked CEOs globally, what is your approval rate for your CMOs? And I'll give you a hint. I'm calling it the unapproval rate, but I'll give you the hint. The unapproval rate is actually higher than the unapproval rate for Donald Trump. And let's say his is 60% in the US. I'm not sure outside. I think it's higher outside. But in the US, it's 60%. The unapproval rate for CMOs is actually 80%. And why is the unapproval rate for CMOs 80%? Primarily because the C-suite feels like marketing is not connected as much as it should be to the objectives of the business. It's not aligned. The spending is not necessarily justified or proven. So marketers and CMOs have a really tough challenge, even inside their own walls, let alone outside, in trying to understand consumers and build brands. This is higher, of course, than not only Donald Trump, but then a CFO or a chief strategy officer or a chief digital officer. This is the highest. Because of this, marketers need to think about the business differently and what their role is differently. They need to think more broadly than a specific area within the marketing function. So I'm going to just give some perspective on different ways to do that. And the first one starts with really helping the business, and these are all things that you help the CEO, you help the rest of the business do. The first one is helping define what the aspiration is of the business, and there are different parts of that. The first is purpose. And in our case, for the Pladis company, we defined it as bringing happiness to the world in every bite. And that started with a conversation a long time ago that I had with the chairman of the company before Pladis was even created, which was applied for Turkey. And what I told him was, we are not selling chocolate. We're not selling biscuits. We're selling happiness to people. That's what they want. And we have our own way of delivering happy moments to people. And we applied that to the Turkey business. We then, when we created Pladis, applied it as the mission of the Pladis business. So that's actually the mission statement, which is to bring or deliver happiness in every bite. The second part is being actively involved as marketeers in defining what the goals are of your company. And here is another example. For our company, and this applies to Pladis as well as broader Yildiz Holding, we call it Goal 21. Goal 21 is an acronym where the GOAL stands for something, and the 21 stands for being either number 1 or 2 in your key categories by the year 2021. But do you know what the G stands for? The G stands for Goya. Now, what does Goya mean? Spanish painter. Anything else? It means get off your ass. Get out to the marketplace. Go learn about your consumer. Go talk to the trade. Get out there and see the business happening. Don't sit in your office. At that point, when we did this, and this was again pre-Pladis, but we put it into Pladis, we had people who would say, I'm too busy to go see the market today. I can't go. I have to do a report. And we said, no, that's not it. You have to get external. You have to go to the market. That's actually the most important thing you can do. And if you talk to entrepreneurs, and there's real benefit of thinking of even big businesses in an entrepreneurial way, they will tell you, I go out to the market, I see what's happening, I understand it. Everyone needs to go there. And so in this case, marketing helped create the values of the company, and the number one is to get out there and get close to the consumer, get close to the market. The next way of defining aspiration is in the creation of a strategic framework. And we have something that we just created called MOVERS. Again, it's an acronym. We like acronyms. And the M stands for money. And we say, show me the money. Now, how in your strategic framework or in the kind of the core values of your company do you actually say, show me the money, or it's about money? Usually we say it's about the purpose, happiness, or it's about happy employees, or something like that. It is those things. But the core of the business is about selling stuff. It's about selling stuff and making money. That's why businesses exist. It doesn't replace the other things like purpose or values, but that's what the business is about. And that's what marketing should be about. Marketing should be about helping create demand to sell more stuff. That's what it's about. Marketing needs to look in this broad way. And it's within that context that you then start to think of marketing models and what we need to do. Within that context, we need to make sure that the ways of working, that our business model works to help us sell stuff. We need to make sure we understand people or consumers in a consumer-centric way to help us sell more stuff. And we need to be able to build brands, create relevance in order to deliver something of value to sell more stuff and to grow. It's all about growth. So marketing's fundamental objective is really about helping the company grow by selling more stuff and doing all those things that we do as marketers, understanding the consumer, building our brands, creating emotional connections. We do all that stuff, but it's for the purpose of this. And when you anchor it into the business, you automatically get closer to what the CEO wants and needs and what the business and the shareholders needs. This is where marketing should be focusing. To do that, we need to redefine the way we think about marketing. And the first point I'd make is we should put the market into marketing. In other words, my point about getting out to the market, really understanding the market, getting aligned with the CEO, focusing externally. The second point is kill the CMO. And I don't mean kill the CMO as a person. I mean kill the CMO term. Because when you say marketing, you automatically apply the function to it, and you put walls around it. And the way of operating today should be breaking silos, working more cross-functionally, less about the function and more about the objective of what you're trying to do. And what you find is that actually marketing partnering with R&D, or marketing partnering with sales, or marketing partnering with technology, that these happen at a more important level than actually marketing and a bunch of marketers doing marketing stuff. So I'm not saying eliminate the marketing function or getting rid of the CMO, but I'm saying think of it differently. In fact, even the term CMO, I think it's outdated. It should be something else like Chief Demand Officer, Chief Growth Officer, Chief Relevance Officer, Chief Experience Officer. It should actually be something else more related to what marketing really should be focusing on. The next point is democratize leadership. And what I mean by this is the way that data and digital tools are now, those tools, those insights are in the hands of, will be in the hands of people who understand those things. They'll be in the hands of analytics people, data people, people who understand digital social media. And those are often young people who have a certain upbringing through more of the science side, more of the digital technology side, and they haven't gone through the ranks of traditional marketing hierarchy. So those people are not going to be sitting at the top of the organization. They're probably 2 or 3 or 4 levels to go between you get from there to a CMO, let alone a CEO. And what you don't want to have happen is the insight, the learning, the knowledge that's created with these people getting trapped in the organization. Knowledge is power. And leaders in business, whether you're a CMO or whether you're a CEO, you have to unlock that knowledge and power. And that's what I mean about democratizing leadership. It's not based on your title. It's based on what you know and what you can add, and those people need to get up. The next is building capabilities. With this changing requirement, you need to have the right capabilities. And I call it an X and Y capability set. We can't have people, or we do, but we need to have people who can think both X and Y. What do I mean by that? Both art and science, both creatively and analytically, both strategically and tactically, both kind of thinking things through, but also being able to act quickly. This is the skill set that's required in today's business world and certainly in marketing. You may have specialists in one or the other, that's normal, but it's good to have people who can appreciate and unlock both sides of that equation. Okay, so that's redefining marketing. I now want to get into the kind of classic consumer centricity and the brand relevance pieces, but again, with a slightly different lens. And I'm going to give you some examples here that we experienced at Yildiz Holding. So the first point I'll make is, we talk a lot about consumer centricity, understanding the consumer, being consumer-led. We talk a lot about this. It's actually proven, there's a study by Forrester Research, that those companies that are consumer-focused, consumer-led, focus on delivering better customer experiences, actually outperform companies that are not. So being consumer-focused is not just a mantra for the marketing department, it's a mantra for business. There is a business reason to be consumer-led. Okay? So it's very, very important. I'm tying back into we should be businessmen and women, not just marketeers. There's a business reason to be consumer-focused. And the best way to start on this is to try and create a map or a framework for how you create an insights learning plan. And this is an example of one that says, okay, these are the blocks or areas that are important to us. One is around shoppers, one is around people, and notice I'm saying people, I'm not saying consumers, but people. The world around us, brand performance, those sort of things. This is a sample framework. This is how you can populate that and say, okay, so these are the things that I would need to be doing in there. And these are some of the typical studies that you probably are doing yourselves, and many companies are doing this. There's nothing new in these studies. What we did was we created this map and said, this is how it links. And where we're going to start with is actually the core of where the business starts, which is that consumption moment, that analog moment when someone is actually consuming our product. That's what we need to know about. And once we do that, then we will build out and learn other things and see how it relates back to this moment. So we did a 6Ws study. We call it 6Ws because it measures the who, what, where, when, why, and why not of snacking behavior. And we did the study through Added Value Kantar Group, who's a specialist in this area. I had done it with Pepsi as well. And it was really important for us to put this down as the kind of foundation of how we would look at our confectionery business. So after the acquisition of United Biscuits, we did this study in 4 key markets: the UK, Turkey, US, and Saudi Arabia. We had 55,000 consumption moments that we got all the data for. And we got a really good understanding of where our categories play in people's lives. And we understood that it's in the everyday lives of people that our brands and products are delivering. Now, many companies, many people look at need states or they look at typologies, and these are all good. The reason we went a step beyond that and used consumption moments combines need states and typologies together. When you take all of these together, you have a much higher predictor of the reason why of consumption. Here's an example. If you just look at need states, you have a 52% correlation between that need state and the explanation of someone's consumption. If you combine all of these and get a true consumption moment with these things factored in, you get 77%. That's a really high correlation and a good predictor of how consumption works. I now want to just give you a few tips about, back to the point of redefining marketing, how to use digital. If you were to go back and look at your consumer plans, consumer insights plans, what are some things that you should think about doing? Number one, make sure you link insights to action. And the number one complaint I hear from CEOs of different companies is that we do a lot of consumer research, but then we don't do anything with it. Or we have data, and then we don't do anything with it. And even marketing people will say, well, we've got things in different places, but we're not sure what to do with it. So when you set up research, you need to make sure you have a clear reason for why you're doing it. You should have a hypothesis on what you're trying to get at and what it could tell you. And you should have it linking to your strategy and linking to activation. What are you going to do with it when? And make sure that plan is set. That's a really important thing to make sure that you use insights in the right way. The second is, just to give you an example, when we had those 55,000 consumption moments, consumers did a 30-minute questionnaire to kind of fill that in for us. You can't get consumers to spend that much time now. It has to be faster, it has to be more convenient. And so what we look at now is we try and do consumer research using no more of 10 minutes of consumers' time. And we try and do it with mobile tools as well. And if you talk to Kantar about this, really leaders in this area, they'll tell you we're trying to find faster, more efficient, more effective tools that are less disruptive for consumers. Remember, consumers, they're not comparing this with other research that they do in their lives. They're comparing the time you take from them with the time they used to spend on other things. They don't want to watch a video for more than 90 seconds. So if they've got a 90-second attention span for a video, how much time are they really going to want to put into a research study? So you got to be fast. Second is, don't think just about the consumer, think about the whole human. It's a person. It's people that we're selling to. So you need to understand that consumption moment and the consumer across the broader frame of that's a person living daily life. And ultimately, we're trying to add value to people in their lives. That's what good brands and companies do. So you need to understand their life. You need to not just understand their consumption or shopping moment. Fourth point is use social to enrich research and findings you already have. And what we're looking at doing in some of the companies that we're dealing with, I'll give you an example of the 6W study, is using that data to get even deeper and broader in consumption moments by flushing it out or putting color to it through social media. Because social media is actually people in their daily lives, and you start to capture their attitudes and behaviors, and you use that as a supplement. The next is leverage the data you have toward execution. And I'll give you one example. We typically, all of us, do concept product tests when we have something new that we want to launch or consider an innovation. You do that and you look at the purchase intent and you say, okay, it's got, let's say, 70% top 2 box purchase intent. That means we should launch it. You take the research you put it away, you never look at it again, and you start developing a plan to launch that product in the market, including a media plan. What is a good use of a data ecosystem and what we should be moving towards is imagine you do that concept product test and you find out who were those people who had the highest purchase intent. You take them out and you model them into a broader set. You take that subsegment and you model it to a broader segment. And guess who is the number one target in your media plan? Them, because you know they like it. So you start with the people who you've already done research with that you know have high purchase intent rather than starting over. So that's one example of using data for execution and using your broader ecosystem. My last section is on brand relevance. And can I just, how are we doing on time? Okay. So last section's on brand relevance. And I want to start it with Socrates. And Socrates' quote, considered one of the deepest, smartest people in all time, father of philosophy. And he says, the only true wisdom is recognizing your ignorance. That is true wisdom. And what happens, especially when you're working in your own field in marketing, and if you've done it for a while, or if you're CEO of a company, or you've been, working on things that you have a lot of experience in, is you get too comfortable. You get comfortable with yourself, and you know it already. And you face people saying, well, we've done that before, it didn't work. Or just trust me. And then in that situation, what happens is the person with the highest rank outweighs the others, right? Because it just gets to opinion. And so we need to break out from this comfort zone and really recognize that we don't know it all. We need to be uncomfortable with things we do. That's how we do things differently. And when it comes to brand relevance, this is the really important point I'd like to make is, this is what I call the paradox of brand relevance, which is brands are mostly irrelevant to people. We're not relevant. We're not naturally relevant. We have to fight to make our brands relevant. Consumers actually don't need us. There are very, very few brands that consumers really need. And most of those are replaceable in some way. I can't live without my iPhone. It's my office, it's my everything. But geez, if Apple went out of business, I'm sure I would, get something else. Even that is replaceable. And I go back to the brain and what's happened to our brain. Our brains, getting 74 gigabytes of information a day, 5,000 messages. The number one thing it does? It tries to survive. That's what our brain is wired to do, to survive. And you know what it does? To do that, it filters out what's irrelevant. So most of that 74 gigabytes that comes and attacks your brain is filtered out. Most of the 5,000 messages that come into your brain are filtered out. They're garbage. Consumers don't look at it. When a consumer walks in a store, you've got 2,000 SKUs or 10,000 SKUs that they're working through, and the basket size is probably 20 items. Those are thousands of items that are not being picked because the brain is filtering this stuff out. So we need to start from the perspective that our brands are irrelevant and we need to fight to make them relevant. Being relevant is not a birthright. I don't create a campaign or launch a new product and put it out there and expect people to care. I would actually expect people to not care, and that's the starting point I should have. That's the starting point for brand relevance. That's where you put some urgency into brand relevance. Now, a little quiz. Let's define, we're talking about brand relevance, let's define what brand relevance is. So I'm going to put three descriptions here, and I'd ask just for a show of hands on whether you agree with the statement or not. So the first statement is, again, trying to define what is brand relevance. It's a brand that understands consumers, delivers meaningful benefits, and adds value to people's lives. Brand relevance or not brand relevance? How many would say, yes, this is brand relevance? Okay, how many would say you agree with the statement, at least? Okay. Next one, brand that provides positive customer experiences through the right message, right time, right place, to the right consumer. Any hands? Okay, a lot of hands. Okay. A brand that is distinct where it matters, has emotional connections, and has a memorable image. There are things you remember about it. It gets into your brain. Hands? Okay. All right, and so the answer is all of the above. They're all correct. And the reason I did all these is because there isn't really a single true definition of what brand relevance is. But you'll know it when you have it, and these are elements of brand relevance. These are crucial things that you have to fight for, you have to fight to create. Okay, so this is a way of thinking about brand relevance. It's a framework that says, with brand relevance at the core, what are the things we really need to be doing to build brand relevance? So the first part is consumer centricity. The second is creating the right brand proposition. The third is making sure that the consumer and the brand come together with a positive experience. And the fourth is recognizing the world context in which we live or are going to be living. Because our relationship with brands and those experiences are not just in a vacuum between us and consumer, it's in the broader world. It's in the broader world of where we live. So, as an example, if consumers are used to getting on their mobile and ordering something from Amazon, having a very pleasant customer experience, and they get it the next day, does that impact what you're doing with your brands and products, even if you're selling a chocolate or a biscuit? Yes, it does. It does. You have to see what what's happening in the world. So this is a framework way of thinking about brand relevance. I want to give you an example from Godiva. And Godiva, if you don't know it, it's a premium chocolate brand. It's very big in the US. It's now even bigger in Japan, amazingly. It's really great in Japan. It exists also in a few other markets around the world, and it's growing in those markets. It's a Belgian. It was originated in Belgium, owned by Campbell's, and then Yildiz Holding bought it in 2008. So the original positioning and work around Godiva was around quality and the ultimate chocolate. It was all about that luscious chocolate that was kind of expensive that people really appreciated. They appreciated it so much that it was actually a gift of choice on Valentine's Day or Christmas time. It became a currency that people would give and say, oh, this means I care for you. Here's a gold box of chocolate. So it was the ultimate chocolate. And when you ask people and consumers and even employees, what does it stand for? You get these sort of things. This is a cloud of the things: high quality, it's upper class, it's worth more, it's sensuous, it's these sort of things. And that's where the brand was heading for years. And certainly after Yildiz Holding acquired it in 2008, that's where the brand was heading. But something didn't seem right, and it didn't seem right because in the US, the brand was not growing. Something was wrong. And within that context, some of us in the business, and I was one of the leading, let's say, most vocal person, because I'm in marketing, I can be vocal about our brands, said something is wrong about the state of the brand. And in fact, we discovered there was, and there's even if you want to look, there's a Harvard Business Review case on this from 2016 about this very issue. And that is, although the research metrics and the employees and the leaders of the business felt like everything was okay with the brand and the brand experience and it was relevant, something was not right on that. And so what we did was a study called the BAV, which is a brand asset valuator study done by Young and Rubicam, which measures not only traditional measures like, is a brand relevant, what's the image or esteem, do you know about it, but it measures a fourth metric, which they call energized differentiation. Energized differentiation. And in today's world, that measure is really important because it tells you which brands connect with consumers better, which ones have forward momentum, which ones are people talking about. And if you look on here, you'd see that Godiva does very well in those traditional measures, which is why people thought the brand is doing fine. But when you look at this, it was declining. And that's just over a 2-year gap. It was declining. There was an issue. And the premise was that we were talking too much about ourselves in the chocolate and not about the experience in consumers. And if you look deeper into the results, you'd see there were a bunch of attributes when you do this sort of study that are going down. Progressive, sensuous, different, daring, unique, up to date. These were actually declining metrics, which you would not see in a traditional study, but in this study we could see it and uncover it. And we put this together and shared it with the board. We shared it with the chairman first, who bought off on it. then shared it with the Godiva board and said urgent action is needed because the energized differentiation is too low and we need to do more things. We tried to pinpoint from the data what are the things that we need to work on. These are some attributes or metric areas that we identified were more important. But what it really came down to was the brand needed to be updated. And I call it the R curve that all brands need to be thinking about, but it certainly applied to Godiva. You know, you'll hear people say, oh, we need to refresh our brand or rejuvenate our brand or reinvent. I think, you know, all of these are important. Refresh is the minimal. So you're just updating some things. Rejuvenate is you're putting a spark in it, you're trying to do some new things. And then reinvent is one where you're changing everything. You've got a lot to change about your business and framing your brand. So we knew Godiva needed to get on this R curve and fast. And so at that time, we were between the refresh and rejuvenate area. That's where we needed to be on Godiva. I'll tell you that thinking about it now, fast forward a couple years, I say it's in the reinvent stage now, and we're actually doing some of those things about reinventing the Godiva experience in the US. But what are some of the things that worked to get us on this R curve after the study? The first is we changed the positioning, not to be the ultimate chocolate, but to be the ultimate chocolate experience. So we're not telling people, oh, we're a great Belgian chocolate, rich, complex variety of flavors. Okay, that's fine. But it's all about the consumer. And what is that moment with the consumer? What is that experience? It's a wow moment. It's a moment that turns the ordinary to extraordinary for the consumer. That's what it needs to be about. So with that, we changed the layout. We have a new design for stores, and we're continuing to create new formats for that, making it much more, let's say, attractive and fun and things like that. We got more sensual in the description of the brand, more about what the experience is. And this is chocolate never felt so good, right? It's about the feeling of chocolate. And we moved more into self-treat. And if you segment, you know, in chocolate, it's easy to segment. Good chocolates have gifting and they have self-treat. And Godiva was all about gifting. Almost all the business was in gifting. Like gold box to someone 1.7 times a year on average, and that was it. We wanted to make it more about you, the person, in self-treat. And so we got Godiva ice cream, Godiva strawberries and chocolate, these sort of things, and a lot more stuff coming out. And these are things that we did very actively in Japan, which is a very vibrant market. So I wanted to give you that example for brand relevance. So just in summary, I went through a lot and I went fast, and I hope it was close to being on time. This is a summary page. So number one, we are living in a transformative period right now where the rules of marketing are changing. We need to be able to tap into digital as an enabler. We need to redefine the ways of working in marketing, how marketing adds value to the enterprise, to the business, but also, importantly, understands consumers and helps build relevant brands. Within each of these areas, it's important to create a roadmap to know where you're going, so it's not an odyssey, but it's a clear journey. It's important to embrace technology and new ways of doing things now, and new ways of thinking. Remember the X and the Y, right? Strategic and tactical. We need to be able to do these things. This applies to all businesses, and it also applies to the food and beverage industry, which is why I was really happy to get a chance to talk to you about it, because I think in food and beverage, we need to catch up and get ahead, because our products are so core to life, right? These are the products people consume all the time. The challenge is making our products relevant brands that people need and want. That's the big challenge. Thank you very much.